Добре дојдовте на вториот дел од Крик. Првиот дел повеќето од вас знаете дека беше во јуни и ги нарековме пролет, лето, есен, зима. Во овој дел ќе заокружиме во декември. Ќе ни бидат, вечерва имаме честно, затоа повеќе ќе подоцна. Вечерва имаме чест Ариане Шпаниер да биде тука со нас. Следната недела ќе ги имаме Борис Буден и Стефан Новотни. И во декември Бранислав Димитриевич. Сите луѓе, главно сите што доаѓаат на Крик, се луѓе кои што флотираат некако помеѓу официјалната и алтернативната култура, политика, мисла. Се обидуваме, значи, да покренеме некои прашања кои што сметаме дека се важни во нашиот обид да ги преживееме овие времења во кои што не чувствуваме припаѓање. И затоа, токму и годинава, фестивалот се нарекува и човек без својства, политики на маргините. Јас само уште една реченица ќе кажам пред Артан да кажа уште 2-3 реченици. Многу ни е драго, бидејќи Крик го сметаме затворена платформа и постојано повикуваме на приклучување, на соработништво, на взаемност. Многу ни е драго, бидејќи дел од Крик се престои за проектниот простор. Јана Чаловска и Христина Ивановска и вечерва тие се заслужни затоа што ја имаме како гостинка Ариане. Вечерва и припаѓа ним и Јане ќе ја води вечерта. Од каква арта?
Па, сто да додаме повеќе, освен фактот што ако ја гледате програмата оваа година, сите теми кои ги зафаќаме преку различните предавачи и гости кои ги зборат и имаат презентација. Оваа предавање и презентација вечер малце отхопно во смисла на нејзината содржина, бидејќи се бави со дизајн. Затоа е доста интересно и за нас и за програмата да има таква содржина, бидејќи дизајнот денеска начинот на кој секојдневно го живееме преку неговата комерцијализирана форма, доста комерцијализирана, хиперкомерцијализирана форма. Она што вече ќе го гледаме и можда ќе имаме поише простор и да дискутираме како и зашто може дизајнот различно да служи како алтернативна форма за премислување, обмислување. И она што иде позадина цело време Fukt е една од поважните изданија кои отвара нови димензии вон она што е мејнстрим, комерцијализирано, спремно за конзумација како форма на дизајн и ова предавање особено исто така пак ќе кажам на некој начин е интересен прекршок со другите предавања кои сме ги имале до сега, но и очекуваме дека од тој прекршок ќе излезат доста различни интересни содржини кои ќе видиме како може да се гледаат и да се преиспитаат од главната тема на нашиот овогодинешен фестивал, кој е човек без својства и праксите и политиките на припаѓање и неприпаѓање, кои секако се врзуваат со секоја друга пракса општествена и уметничка естетичка, како што е дизајнот. Затоа се надевам ќе имате интерес и после тоа да дискутираме и поставате прашања. Благодарам што дојдовте на отварањето на втор дел на фестивалот. Јане Чаловски ми продолжи да се.
Веќе благодарност на изграденото на целиот на фестивалот. Тоа мислам неизмерно многу ни значи Крик на сите нас, бидејќи според мене најдобрата дискурсивна програма што се има понудено кај нас во институционална и тоа е многу значајно, придобивка имаме сите, посебно веруваме институциите, зашто гледаат што може и како може да се конципира и да се изведе како програма. И во таа смисла исто благодарност до Националната галерија што го препознава тоа што го стапува просторот. Наистина ни е пријатно тука. За приказната за Fukt, за Бјорн и Ариане, бидејќи едно нешто што морам да кажам на почетокот, тука и Бьорн Хегарт, кој е партнер на Ариане Шпаниер, мој старши пријател. И всушност тој го почнува Fukt 1999 година како студент во Академијата во Тронхајм, како студентски проект. Ние се запознатме во 2001, кога дојдов од веќе се имаше преселено во Берлин, кај наша заедничка пријателка, исто уметник која била во Скопје, Стефкано. И како покажа Списанието беше прилично едноставно, но што значеше тој момент е видно. Буквално имаше потреба да се етаблира и да се наметне цртежот како пракса и како мисла и да му се даде некаква публицистичка рамка. Тоа праксата на Бьорн е цртачка по природа и без да се чека некој да те открие, сам први почнува најзначено сами да откриеш таа потреба, дека недостасува нешто. Во случајот недостасуваше еден на почетокот можеби во зин форма, некакво списание кое ќе го артикулира цртежот како нешто кое е непредвидливо и возбудливо и значајно на повеќе нивоа. Првите 4 едиции беа Бьорн сам ги работеше, мене тотално ме инспирира за тоа и малку подоцна. Се запознаваат со Ариане 2005-та, кога Ариане се враќа од Њујорк и го представува своето студио, Ариане Шпаниер студио, и тогаш се минува приказната на Fukt во смисла дека сега е тимски поставено, уредничкиот дел го има Бьорн, но дизајнерскиот дел го има Ариане. И во тој момент мислам дека беше и тоа ќе го видите првото списание што го имате направено заедно е се однесува на анимацијата. Веднаш предизвика неверојатен одглас имаше во уметничкиот свет, некако мислам, the International Art World Noticed. Веднаш го примети и тоа списание предизвика на серија изложби, серија на дискусии. Тогаш ние почнавме со престој екзит, дојдоа во резидентен престој Бьорн и Ариане. Јас бев веќе инспириран од Бьорн, па го почнав D Magazine, па потоа се споивме и почна некои многу интересни разговори, буквално на што кога разговаравме со Искра што да понудиме. Тоа градење на заедница кој го доживеавме со нив беше едно исклучително искуство и од само создадено, но со многу љубов и со многу предаденост, посветеност. Бьорн е извонредно скромен човек и дозволи на Ариане, мислам од дозволи, погрешно се изражам, дозволи можеби е правил дизајнот да го оформи Fukt како појава, меѓународна појава, и за да може после уредничкиот дел да некако да дише внатре и во тој и да се наметнуваат некако едноставни процеси на комуникација буквално помеѓу етаблирани светски познати и непознати уметници или уметници во подем, буквално да има за сите место некако да стане заедничко нешто. 18 броја тогаш имат издадено. Fukt е ценет и почитуван како редок, таков примерот, поготово посветен на цртежот. И голема заслуга за тоа како одржува вниманието на публиката има посебно Ариане. Ариане ги користи насловните страници како посебен мислам еден простор за промислување на тематот во секое од изданијата. Тоа ќе го видите, мислам дека имаме едно 8 изданија со нас вечерва. И навистина е еднаш годишно излегува и е нешто што се очекува. Мислам дека листата на платници им расте, поканите за сите овие веќе етаблирани нови сајми на книга се постојано им стигнуваат и се уште се интимен, малтим од луѓе, но мислам дека се неверојатни во тоа како успеваат да одговорат на сите покани. Посебно ни е важно што доаѓаат во Скопје после колку 2006, не знам, 13 години. И нешто што исто многу за мене драго, во рамки на функции имаат исто публикувано дела од Христина Ивановска, од Елимир Жирновски и од Милен Ничевски. Секогаш некако бевме отворени тоа да видиме да се создадат услови да се промовира и нашата сцена. Сега малку за Ариане, она е еден исто предсе човек кој е многу дарежлив со своето време, со своето знаење. Незиното студио е толку ценето од најразлични од архитекти и од куратори институции, независни уметници и така натаму. Има еден куп проекти и успева на се да одговори. Ние го знаеме лично, бидејќи со нејзе сме соработувале. Има Fukt го работат како едногодишно списање подушно излегува во септември. И нејзината пракса сега влегува и во, мислам, после толку многу искуство, многу е значено тоа искуство да се пренесе. Имаат многу млади луѓе кои работат со нив во Берлин. Исто така Ариане е се повеќе присутна во некои меѓународни асоциации, здруженија, каде што е член на родови, член на работни групи или жирија. И нејзиниот дизајн е наградуван и така натаму, а во цело време постои една извънредна скромност на еден човек кој ја цени работата, ја цени исто заедницата која ја вреднува таа работа и успева да направи еден исчекор од ова рамка на уметничката заедница, тоа да стане некако видливо и ценето во некој поширок културен простор, да стане по-популарно, што исто многу значено за цртежот на крајот на приштата, како една пракса која се занемарува, се заборава колку е интересна и значена. Ариане, I did my best to explain a little bit the history and the meaning and somehow the combination of information that gives a background to what Bjorn started and what then both of you developed, and how all of many people, but us included, myself, Christina Belling and Mila, who's not here, but that we've had a contact and we've collaborated with you, for which we're very thankful. And it's really wonderful that you're here. Thank you so much for also finding your niche within the concept of click, which is really, as I said at the beginning, in my opinion, and I believe in the opinion of many of us here, one of the most progressive discursive programs that is outside of the institution, within the independent cultural sector, but in contact with all of us, artists and institutions and everyone. So it's in the frame of this year's concept of building communities and feeling outside within the margin, but finding a way to penetrate the system. I think it's great that we're going to have a chance to see what you've done, especially what you've achieved over the years and within the last issue, which is systems. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you to Selma and Uni for being here also with us. I should also say something. Selma and Uni are 8 years old, and so since I think in the last 6 issues, they've also featured in the magazine. And this is a really beautiful moment to remember that drawing somehow begins unconsciously really early in our lives. We all draw, we're all good, and in drawing at the beginning, it's a language we understand and we practice. And it's really wonderful that in the magazine there's also a space, a few pages to remember that through their work. So it's really great. Thanks for being here. the floor is yours. And I should also say that at the end of the presentation, we will maybe, and I hope we have a chance to have a Q&A. I'll be here to moderate. So, yeah. But for now, please.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Iskra and Kvik, for inviting us here to Skopje again now after our first visit in 2006. It's really interesting, and it feels like we're back to a different city. So yeah, I'm really happy that we are here and that we can talk a little bit about this magazine of ours. And this talk will be in the form of an A to Z. So it will tell a little bit about the story of Fukt magazine. I know that Jan has outlined a few of the things, but we will give you some more context to it. And I'm the creative director of that magazine, and while it's the only magazine I design, actually, all my other jobs are of different kind. So there might be publications or posters or identities, and I think Jan also said something about that. This is still something that is very to my heart, and it's a collaborative project between Björn and myself. And we'll just get to the letter A, which in German could have been the word for start, but that doesn't work in English. So we have to start with A for Ariane. Since I was a kid, I had to live with that joke of my name being the same name of a European rocket. And just like my uncle keeps bringing that joke up every time we speak. B for beginning. Because I want to give a little bit background about myself, I started very early an editorial career. At the age of 8, the same age as Yuni and Selma are now, I made a zine about a story that is from a book, and it's very well known to East Germans mostly, about a Native American who befriended a cowboy. And it was a story of friendship and a Western story with horses. And that was the first zine. It was an original work, and I had little contributors of my friends' contributions, and I was the editor-in-chief. And after that project, I published a school magazine in my school when I was about in 5th grade. And it was called Kibitz, which is the name of the bird. And I produced most of the content myself, and out of lack of a computer in 1990, I used a typewriter, electroset letters, drawings, collages, and then it was just photocopied. Just after the wall had come down, all of a sudden there were copy machines available. And this magazine that contained just everything I thought a magazine needed. It was recipes for whatever, cakes and sweets to do, and little riddles and really stupid 90s jokes. And I think I even wrote some text about climate change, which is not that different to now. Just then it was the ozone hole, which was the big talk. So we sold them for 50 cents in the schoolyard. But C for cutting the crap, because I'm not here to talk about this school magazine or my other first zine on Native Americans. So I'm here to talk about this. if anything else, we try to be exactly that reason. Fukt magazine is a magazine for contemporary drawing, as you heard, and it was founded in Norway in 1999. We publish it one time a year. The name is Norwegian and means moist or humidity. And that's a memorable name. It does also sometimes cause some trouble for us. You will learn later on about that. And when Björn and I met, or let's start earlier, when he founded the magazine, and that was in 1999, there was actually nothing else on the magazine or publication market out there for drawings. So there was no platform really for the medium of drawing. I think your friends and you needed just a place to show and exhibit and to look at drawings. And so since the beginning, the magazine has aimed towards that, to provide that space and that platform for drawing. Also because drawing at that point really started to become something that's valuable as an art form, while I think many years before it just has been, like a tool for other artworks, like it's for sketches and for these first ideas, but it wasn't really considered as art itself. And until today, the magazine has built an archive of contemporary drawing with, I think, more than 450 artists by now that we have featured. And we met in 2004, and I think some of our first conversations were about that magazine. And I considered it cute, and it still appeared to me as done by a non-designer. So it was, independent, A5, glue-bound. It was really lovable. Here you see some pages of, I think, the first issue. And in these very first publications, or these first issues of the magazine, we were also showing artists like David Shrigley or the New Yorker street artist Swoon. So in the beginning, it was a purely visual magazine, so it was only images, only drawings, without any text. And Björn and I, we do share this strong interest in drawing, or a love for drawing. And when I was in art school, I did loads of drawings. So I was even unsure what to become, if I wanted to become an artist. I mean, I studied design, but we had a strong focus on drawing. And in a technical sense, I have to check if it's running. No. In a technical sense, I'm quite okay at drawing, and I sometimes have good ideas. And in the same time, for me, always there was something lacking, some real design, words, typography, photography, other graphics. So that's why I decided to become a designer, because I can do all kinds of different things in that field. And in that sense, I'm not really good in drawing, but it always stayed very close to me, and it always feels like home to me, the medium of drawing. And here you see a work of Björn's. And drawing is really graphical, and when I see different kind of artworks, and that might be photographs or an installation or drawing, and then I would always look at the drawing first, so I always feel drawn to it and it pulls me in. And I guess drawing is something that comes really close to graphic design for me, and after all, drawing is this very, human, creative act, and something that we do as children, something that we do before we, learn the language or learn to write. Like the first thing we do is drawing. It is basically our first language. And it wasn't until 2 years into our relationship that I got my hands on the design. This issue is also here. And I wondered, how far could I go with the design? So Björn has designed all the other issues before that by himself. And this issue had also a CD or DVD with animations on it. And he drew the cover, and we used the photo of a neon sign we had of the magazine, and then it was a kind of a mix-up of design and his drawing, and it was a little bit done under my art direction. So it was a big testing out, like how can we do this collaboration on this magazine. And in this magazine there was, for instance, in this issue there was this little flip book thing happening in the upper right corner. So it started already a bit playful out there. And in the issue we would show drawings, like still drawings, that would also be, you know, like animations that would run then on the DVD. Like this, for instance. Also, this artist, Press Tube, he created really wonderful drawings, and we showed these as animated. So we were working with still and moving images in that. Let's get to D for dirty drawings, because sometimes we do sell our souls as well, if it's necessary. Many years and many issues later, we had noticed that very many artists are actually working with erotica, and they are working about sex. It's very easy as it is. And this became our first entirely thematic issue. Before that, we had worked mostly just to create an interesting mix of drawings. But with this one, it was our first topic for an entire issue. And it really worked, because we got actually into Playboy's reading corner. It's really small on the bottom. And there is this fascinating layer of abstraction when it comes to erotic drawings, because what you don't have as with, you know, photographs, they are so direct and so pure and radical and hardcore sometimes. You can always have these layers with drawings that puts maybe a funny side to things, or it can be just a little bit quirky, and it can be just simply weird. So this issue sold really, really well. It was really as simple as that. And for some reason, for this issue, many people sent us photos of their cats with it. And I usually create some type of teaser and animation that would promote the magazine, and that has also to do with like finding another way of speaking about the magazine, and going a bit further in the sense of what can be done to still images. That's our setup here, because the beamer is actually sending the sound. Let's get to E for effort, because you cannot run a magazine like ours without putting a lot of work, loads of time, sweat and effort into it. So in terms of the design, we sometimes test out things that for sure fail, that never worked out, where we spent way too much time on the design. Sometimes, or actually quite often, I try to capture movement, because motion is something that's very closely related to drawing. It's related to the act of drawing, because it's like setting a dot in motion, and you move your body, your hand, your arm, and creating lines by the movement of your hand or your arms is something that it's all about movement and motion. And since I had taken over the art direction of the magazine, there was one rule that I had set up, like on these covers of the magazine, there should never be a drawing. Like the magazines are completely filled with drawing from the beginning to the end, and there was this rule, it had to be typography. And in the same time, or in the same way, I work on the front covers, these back covers are as important to me. And sometimes printers would mix it up and print the back on the front. And usually these cover concepts are applied to the layouts inside of the magazine, and it is a very playful approach to the design of Fukt magazine. It's a lot about trying out things that you know, maybe really didn't lead to anything like this one. I mean, I can't even remember what I tried to achieve. But it was just fun because it was really bad, and it was just like, let's do it, and let's do like 10 kilos of jelly. And sometimes I would just write a text or an essay that someone had submitted completely by hand, even though I knew it was a little bit, you know, hard to read. And capturing movement, as I said, is something that came back into the magazine often. And for other times, we would maybe stripe someone up and have her moving in front of the camera and taking as many shots as possible and creating shapes out of these movements by putting like 500 photos on top of each other, and I would create things like that reminds on human movement and in some way on drawings and letters. And in other times we would have these little robots, or it's like little machines that run connected to feathers and brushes, and they would run through little ink drops and mess up the drawing of these letters. And we had to decide against that because it's just not making a good cover, but it was really funny to shoot this and see what they were doing. And there's this joy for us in creating processes that look and feel like a joke, and sometimes it's really just because, and it might be just a very hilarious thing to do. With the distance to this, for instance, now I would think like, why didn't we do this in a computer from the start? But it was not about that. It was about process and studio work and studio life and the fun we had all together doing it, even though it meant that, I don't know, the daylight came and went and cameras were bending down and everything got distorted and we had to do it all over again. So I think all these cover designs for the magazine are like an homage to drawing without actually being a drawing itself. And I think the underlying core of all of these are drawing, but I really don't care if this is done by graphite or powder or someone just moving and dancing with the striped tape around their body. So this is kind of to understand this, the approach to design for the magazine. And every issue basically looks different than the previous one. There is no like concept for the design in this. It's just new every time. F for fulfillment. There's a cover of the magazine I did in 2009, and it was rolled up paper that revealed some drawings underneath, and it was quite successful. And when it got shared a little bit online, I got a lot of requests by other magazines, bigger magazines, that asked me to repeat that cover for them. And usually I don't want to do that, I always say no. And then at some point there was the Washington Post magazine, the weekly magazine of the newspaper, and they had asked and wanted to use that, or like me to redo it, and I just couldn't say no, because it was just too big of a magazine. And I recreated the same concept for them, which was an issue about people that had died in that year. And this was in 2012, I think. And it was revealing stories of these people that had passed. And it was very beautiful and got around a lot. And I still keep getting these requests for exactly that same cover, and people want to have it redone for their magazine. And last year in December, someone had sent me an image of a magazine from Chile, which is kind of similar to the Washington Post magazine. It was also a weekend magazine of a newspaper, and it looked very, very closely to what I had done in 2012. And I got really angry at first, and I thought about putting it out on Instagram and ranting about it, and really, I was so annoyed by someone just doing that. And then a friend told me that, no, don't do it, it's really bad karma. And I realized that he is right, and that it's really not doing myself any good to be angry about that, and that will just pass. And there's always this wave and feeling of revenge, but one just has to let go, because the real harm happens to that person and to the designer who just ripped it off, because it's someone else's work and you can never really be proud of it, and because you can't have the satisfaction of coming up with the idea first. And so this is nothing that will ever be fulfilling in any way. And there's another aspect of fulfillment with a magazine, or with doing a magazine in general, because if you look back at all these issues and all these artists that we have featured in the magazine, it gives us this knowledge about drawing in our time, and we built this proper archive of contemporary drawing and of younger and older artists, and some of them have maybe been already, but really became superstars over the years, like David Schrigley or the German artist Ariane Fukt. And there are others, Morrison Merzig on the left, artists that we have followed and have shown again over the time in the magazine. And we showed artists like Raymond Pettibon or from New York, Daniel Zeller. We are really huge fans of Marcel Zama's work. And we really love approaches by artists that work more in other ways and maybe with more spatial concepts to drawing, where a drawing might be an installation, and in this case it would be a huge tape installation in a room. Or Tim Knowles is an artist who would let trees draw by the help of wind, and I think this is something that we are always interested in, like if artists look from different angles at what a drawing can be, basically, and the method of drawing. And here we have Lorna Simpson's with watercolor hair portraits, and there are so many expressions in that only medium of drawing that we observe and we discover also by doing this magazine. Here we have Rinus van der Velde, and it's just a very rich field. And even after 20 years of publishing Fukt magazine for contemporary drawing, here we have Dan Pejovci. And the magazine, is it running? I don't see if it's running on the screen, that's why I have to turn around sometimes. Fukt has changed its dimensions over the year. It was sometimes small, it was sometimes big, the layout, the covers, but what really stays the core of the magazine is the celebration of drawing as a method of artistic and really above all human expression. And cats really, really love it. Let's get to G for greed. In the beginning, the magazine was distributed by whatever chance came by for us. You know, a store, a bookstore we would pass by, or friends that knew of a bookstore, or an art residency we would spend time at. So our distribution system had no structure really. And in 2008 we started to attend the New York Art Book Fair with the magazine. And all of a sudden there was a direct interest in what we had put together. So people came to our tables and they said really nice things, and they were interested and they loved the magazine, and we had never really heard that so much before. Like, that is wonderful, and of course people asked if they could be in it, and at that point we really felt that we needed a better distribution system. So we worked at some point after that for many years with 2 distributors, and it really was a catastrophe. Because what happened was we got the magazine out into the stores, which was great, and we got also more people knowing about the magazine, but there it ended. Like, the payments from the distributors were continuously delayed, so much that at some point they owed us 5-figure numbers. And there is a serious general problem with with distribution and art publications that we noticed over the years, because many of the art books and art publications are funded by public institutions, by great project funds or publication grants. And you don't get me wrong here, I mean, Björn is a Norwegian citizen, so we really benefit from that as well, and we are really, really thankful as well to Norway for their money and their oil and their support for the arts and culture. But ironically, there's something that it's really a downside to this that can make matters worse, because art publication funding became an actual business model for many art distributors, art book distributors, because they know that artists are so grateful that their books are supported and that it's paid for, and that they will never ask for their money back. So I singled out the 6 states of emotions that actually everybody goes through, that we talk to, that ever in their lives dealt with these type of distributors. And the first one would be happiness, because it starts when you manage to get funding for your publication project. You just feel great. And the second one, you find a distributor who is willing to take on your publication. You feel so professional, and you're even more happy. And the third emotion is you see it in bookstores and it's out there and it's so amazing and you are so proud. And then the dark music starts playing, because for some reason you don't see the money, because you don't get paid by the distributors. Number 5 is denial, because you tell yourself, yeah, it's not good, but at least they try and they struggle and this whole business is really tricky. But then the distributors claim, to be sorry, they haven't paid you yet. And if you would just give them more copies, you would get some money, of the previous rounds. And it goes on, and if you hear that 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, there's really just one thing you can do. So after all these years of saying yes to the same shit that they told us, we decided to end all these relations. And we started to, basically stand on our own feet, and we started a web shop, and it seemed like really the most obvious thing to do, and it took us 16 issues of the magazine to come to that moment of clarity, because we were so afraid of all the work that would need to go into, and all the time and all these networks that we wouldn't have, but only the distributors had with the bookstores. But for some reason, our fear of these piling up of books that we don't sell stayed unwarranted, because since we started this web shop, these issues started to sell out. We do have another collaboration now with another distributor, and one that pays actually, and they take over a part of the print run, but it's still right now we do most of the distribution ourselves. And somehow this bad situation that we experienced over all the years led to a lot of work and contacts that Björn established with bookstores and museums and whatnot. And so he built up actually a network, and so that is something that we can really benefit from now, where we can almost say thank you to the bad distributors. But there's also something, let's say there's a weight to that whole issue of doing your own distribution. Because working with publications is really one thing above all. It's about grams and kilos and luggage and shipments and FedEx and DHL. So this is the situation when we get a delivery of 1.5 ton of magazines to a second backyard into Berlin Kreuzberg. And since 15 years, our storage has been on the 5th floor, and this has no elevator. So we carry up, Björn mostly carries up all the boxes to the 5th floor. But it works still. I, for independent, we really wish that like doing an independent magazine would always be easy and fun and sunshine, and sometimes it is, you know, but more often this is something that feels much, much closer to the truth. And we are a very, very tiny team. We have a few people that waste their time with us. This is how great it is to work with us. She's just happy it's over and she can go back clubbing. And people really enjoy what they do. So what does it mean to be or to make an independent magazine? And I think there's a satisfaction in doing it that comes quite close actually to creating art yourself. Only it's like promoting the work of others, but it's a curation and it's a voice into the world and it's saying something to an audience, and they look and read your thoughts, interests, and your tastes and your selection of art and your design. And it really means, and that's the core of it all, that independent means there is no big publisher behind that tells us anything about like what we have to talk about and what we have to show. So it's completely free. And when I meet other, you know, like publishers that work, or like creative directors that work in big magazines, I know it's really great. They have a lot of power and they have a lot of, or like really big audiences, but at the same time, they have owners of magazines and people who run and have a last say in these magazines often, and if it's a bigger corporation behind, and there is really not that freedom that we experience. So being independent is actually the best feeling in the world. And J for jail, because I went to jail once for the magazine. We made one Fukt cover out of little chains that complemented parts of the title letters, and you see it here as well. And when they moved, they would destroy or form the letters. And yeah, maybe you remember these old toys. There were toys with little noses and these chains. And we had the chains attached to the cover by inmates of a female prison in Berlin. And that was a very conceptual approach, and I wanted to make a whole story out of it. But of course, I wasn't even allowed to bring my phone into the prison. So you get the idea here with that image. And this design created an individual cover of each cover being foil wrapped, and the chains became, or like stayed in a different position. And they would just hang down. And for that same issue, there was also a special typeface only for this issue design that we would use inside for the names of the artists. And here you see Fritz Panzer with dimensional drawings in space made out of wire. And a few more of these spreads from that issue of the magazine. And again, cats. If the audience loves it, we are really happy. K for kids. So Fukt is kind of a family business, and 4 or 5 years into my career as a designer and us running Fukt together, we were considering to have maybe one little kid, and that little kid would be very quiet and it would play peacefully in the corner of the room while life would more or less go on. And then the twins came, and I think I just pictured the life like this. You know, the kids would lay in the corner of the room and I would just continue to work on Fukt magazine, and that was the dream and that was the reality. One of them was crying, and we had to have them in our arms, and most of the time life really looked like this or like this, and it makes a funny photo series, but of course this was very close to the truth. And from time to time we just taped them to the wall. Or we just felt very wasted altogether. And then finally at 7, society took over and they got into school. And that's like how a designer and artist's life with kids look like. But as Jana also mentioned before, since early on, we showed their work in the magazine too. And that was always a really funny part of us selecting some of the nice works that they had done during the year. And you would see some collage work of them, or you know, all kinds of contributions here to a text issue with letters and words, and that is, I think, in the recent issue, in the systems issue, where you would see a mermaid being constructed by construction workers. L for limit. So we never wanted to take the magazine like taking over our entire life and our entire time, because even 2 issues per year, and we just do 1, would keep us busy basically all year round. And I think we need to work both in other areas to stay interested in the magazine and in this publishing, in drawing. And growing means one thing first, because it would mean more work and less time and probably even less freedom. There are so many magazines out there that have to be concerned, like what their readership is thinking and what they are wanting and what the target audience might like or not. And I'm not sure, but I have the feeling that growth sometimes might be the opposite of freedom. And it doesn't mean that we don't change or don't grow, and we do that like very, very slowly, basically really in slow motion. But all of this has to be manageable on a human level for us. And speaking of humans, M for mice. Working with animals is embracing chance. And for another issue of the magazine, which is also here, we had mice moving letters around, and that was our intention at least. But they were more into eating these letters. And then we remembered back that little experiment with the little robots and the ink drops, and we had these mice actually running through pools of ink and creating drawings with their tails. And these drawings were also part of the magazine, and they became contributions. So these little animals became artists in that issue of Fukt. That would be the cover that you can see here as well. And we just had 3 at home at that moment. And for some reason, I don't know how we got this cat drawing into the magazine. I think that was just by accident. And found a Bryce, and also from this issue, Vincent Brocaire. And as I said before, we were always into creating these animations and some moving images for the magazine to basically just get what we think and what we believe in into another dimension, into another medium. the mouse's name was Paul, and he wasn't harmed, and we kept him, I think, for 1 more year, and then he died of natural causes. And for no, because there are actually more things to say yes to regarding running an independent magazine, but there are certainly things that we could live without, and I think we need to sound a little bit up now for this.
No to getting rich.
No to unorganized artists.
No to printed ads.
No to I don't like that cover.
No to I like the last one more.
No to dependence.
No to I don't have that image bigger.
No to heavy boxes.
To heavy books.
To heavy luggage.
No to greedy distributors.
No to high shipping costs.
To self-doubts.
To self-pity.
To burnout.
No to fear for the wrong reasons.
No to too much.
To arrogant artists.
To no air at the fair.
To Instagram before breakfast.
No to Brexit.
No to returned packages.
To unplugged time machines.
To printing mistakes.
No to broken neon lights.
To delayed deliveries.
To the police killing our parties.
To broken hard disks.
No to a logo.
So there's no logo of the magazine, or basically there is a new one for each issue. And over the years we changed the formats, and we wanted to maintain the biggest freedom and to do whatever we wanted, if it's small or big, or how the cover looks. And we trusted that the name and the theme is enough to recognize the magazine. And our annual publishing output of 1 issue per year makes us also not really competing with all these other magazines in the newsstands. And over time, this change in the look and in the design became the brand. And Fukt is a hybrid between a book and a magazine, and yeah, maybe you can call it even an anthology. And it is really home in art book stores, or sometimes magazine stands. And the only thing is that we really keep consequent the same is the publishing date of September each year. And we don't print ads in the magazine either, and we do so because we are able to, because of that support from Norway, but also, because we are small and because we are not really in this magazine for the money. And we want to do that because we can keep that way the magazine, clean of commercial interruptions, and we could just keep flows of the artworks in the way we want to show them and we want to tell. Commercials and printing ads is really very often destroying a magazine completely, in my opinion. O for ownership. Let's talk a little bit about this double-sided sword of ownership, because Fukt is a love-needing, hungry pet, and it wants to be fed and wants to be walked, and we are really grateful for everybody who's interested in the drawings, in art and in our magazine. And we've got fans of the magazine all over the world, but it's hyper-subjective, so it's really just what we like. There's basically no democracy in this magazine. It's our personal taste and our look at the world of drawing. But in the same time, that's really what kept it being Fukt for over all these years. It's this personal approach to it. And it also means, or this ownership also means, that we have to do the PR ourselves, and very often we forget to tie our shoes because there's just so much work around the magazine and around publishing. And in the same time, we get all these responses from the artists that are the contributors that are in it, and they're happy to, that pays back, and that really means a lot. It makes readers and watchers or people that look at the art really happy, but also it often means a step, or it can mean a career step for some of the artists that have been in the magazine, because they have gotten exhibitions from being in Fukt magazine. And in that we are basically at once the creators and the interviewers, the press, the designers, the artists, the publishers, the distributors, and the sellers all at once. And it's all power and freedom, and not having to report to anyone is really the best thing about it. And I think it's also the reason why we do it the way we do it. P for prospect. Once we interviewed ourselves from the future perspective of 2035. That was an editorial piece for another magazine, and we asked ourselves from the moment in time in 35, looking back what we have achieved, and we talked about the sex issue that we hadn't even planned by then. And a few of the things that we talked about in that interview with ourselves really became true. And so I'm wondering if we are all write our own history actually when we step outside and take another perspective and think about like how will your story be told in 10 or 20 years. And it's a really interesting perspective to take on, because it's different than when you think about it from now, just projecting into the future. The looking back from even further in the future is something very different. And in this case, looking back was really a way to look forward, because some things really really happened after that. And I'm just quoting ourselves from that piece that we wrote. In 2022, after this whole census and experience hype and the controlled hallucination trigger thing went off, we did one issue in collaboration with scientists from the Gothenburg University in Sweden, and the issue came basically as a drug in the form of 2 pills, and when taking them, you experience the drawings as being inside of them. The issue was around you with its texts and drawings, and you navigated through it with your body. And these hallucinations could be completely targeted by then. Super exciting stuff. Obviously, it just worked once, because each issue just had one set of pills. Q for quitting. I can't say that we are running this magazine since so long and we would never talk about quitting. There are 18 issues now, and each year we repeat basically the same procedure. So we do sometimes discuss if we should stop at some point, because it does put an extra strain and a pile of work and stress on us. And I have all the other design studio jobs, and Björn has his art and his exhibitions. And there's one thing about staying put and continuing, because it gives us a chance to look at things differently over time, and we can leave room for things to grow that need time. And that also with publishing, even though it could be a very fast medium, especially magazines, there are things that you know now that we didn't know in the beginning, and that just needed 5 years, until we could realize them. So far, the excitement to do a new one, and now recently also to themed issues, had kept us like wanting to do another one. R for register. One time a Norwegian feministic porn magazine tried to steal our name. So we heard about this Oslo magazine by 2 graduates from a business design school, and they had just taken that name for their magazine, and their launch party was sponsored by big alcohol brands, and we were just like, what the hell? And they had registered the name already, or were in the process of it, and we were really in big trouble because we never did. And long story short, we scared them off with our imaginary lawyers, and then they backed away, luckily, and called their magazine Humid. And we registered the magazine name immediately, so that's something that we learned big time from that moment. S for system. So we just released it's 2 months ago, we released the latest issue of the magazine called Fukt, the system issue, which looks at artists working and interpret systems. They use it as methods They set up, like artists set up rules and all kinds of schedules to create work, and other artists would illustrate a system or just create new ones, utopian ones, and others are just critical or are critical towards it. And all these approaches and ways of working with that theme led to this issue, and that's also why in this cover design the concept was that to have an issue or have a system actually breaking up by these 3 discs. We also created these different looking ones, and we would show drawings in this issue of the magazine where someone would, for instance, do drawings that are inside of other old machine blueprints and these old maps. And he created completely new worlds and new contexts of that drawing. Or we show some of Jim Carrey's cartoons that he's doing since, I don't know, 4 years or so, where he is commenting on the US administration. And the president is, the US president is his main target. And others would just train a robot to do very artistic lines in portraits, so that robot would actually draw portraits through a camera, and they would look like this. Or we would also have here a project, it's called the Captured Project, where prison inmates in the US drew portraits of CEOs of mega corporations, and you could actually question, like, who's the criminal here? And Pablo Alguera is commenting on the art system, so all his cartoons are centered around the art scene. And if there's still time, and for Fukt we usually make the time, we have parties for the launches, or I would build the cover as an object, and that's all just because it's fun. T for text. For a very long time, text didn't play a role in the magazine. So, as I said in the beginning, it was a purely visual magazine, and sometimes we had an essay or 2. And in the times now of Instagram and all these, scrollable feeds of never-ending imagery that is so accessible to people, we really felt like, okay, we need to change something. So we really started to work a lot more with interviews and conversations with drawings to find out what the artists are actually up and about, and what their idea and their concepts are behind their work. Or it might be just some other related issues that come up in these conversations that is not even drawing related. After 15 years, we began to work on themed issues because we, over all these years, had seen these spikes and themes and topics that artists worked with. So this was a result, basically, of all these previous issues we had done. And I think we also needed the time to collect this knowledge about drawing. And one of the last issues, also here, was one edition that entirely focused on text-based drawings, or written drawings as we call them, where artists would use letters, words and text to create artwork. And the cover would just basically very over-explain every single element of the design of a book cover. And in this issue, we would show artists that cut out the type from the Bible and create these mesmerizing patterns with every single letter contained in that book. And we showed also the mysterious Voynich manuscript. I don't know if you know it. It's 600 years old and it hasn't been deciphered until today. No one knows what it's saying. Many researchers and scientists are still working hard to get to know what it is. We showed Zhu Bing, a Chinese artist who draws landscapes with Chinese characters, or Paula Scher. She's actually a designer, but she also does drawings, and she did like diaries on daily news. And Ed Ruscha's work is legendary, of course. And we would also show, you know, drawings and writings that are actually not writings at all. It's no text, it's illegible, and it's not real language. So here, for instance, would be like the in-between shapes of buildings or words. And for that issue, we tried to play a little bit around with AR to make the cover experience coming to life, and we let the letters basically grow dimensionally out of the cover, which was really fun. And then we had to pack it into an app that the user could download and then use the camera to hold onto towards the magazine, and then that thing would happen. So we submitted this to the App Store, and we didn't think of anything bad. And then we received this email. I was reading, basically, we noticed that your app icon screens or other metadata items include content that is not appropriate for all age groups. Specifically, your app name and screenshots contain Fukt. So, what the hell? Maybe we could have changed the app name, you know, or have another screenshot, but our main problem was that the magazine name is Fukt, and it is in every screenshot because it is always part of the cover. So there was nothing really we could do other than changing the name, which probably won't happen. U for unique. So yes, we are really a niche magazine basically with a really weird name. And for a while, I sometimes thought that is a problem, and as you have seen now in the previous problem with the app, it maybe sometimes is, but somehow I don't know, this magazine is something where I thought, oh, maybe there's a limit, you know, to how many people could be interested in it. It's so narrow, and it's just drawing, and at some point maybe no one will be interested anymore. And we never can have these beautiful photo stories, or we can't show like great editorial graphic design, because we usually leave all the space to the drawings, because that's what the magazine is about. It's not even illustration, it's really fine arts drawings. But over time I realized that this is really not a weakness, it's the strength of the magazine, because it is very, very focused and it's memorable. And that is the name, and it's the niche it's in, and people that love it. And it is sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but in the same time, that is what makes the magazine unique. And I think that's also why many lifestyle magazines nowadays, they come and go and come and go. And it's like sometimes 3 issues, 4 issues, and then they're off the table again, because they all show basically the same mix of content. It's a little bit of art, a little bit of fashion, a little bit of interviews with famous people, and that's what we were sometimes afraid of, that it's too narrow and too close and too specific, has somehow over time shown or like proved to be the strength of this magazine. W for why am I doing this? And yeah, I can tell you exactly why. So when I was a kid, I really enjoyed hanging out in my father's workshop. He was an industrial designer, working as an industrial designer, and he had a studio in the attic of our house, and he would build like little models of watches or models of museums, interiors and lamps, or little other products, and he let me shoot with an air gun into the wall, and also he let me draw on the walls directly. And I really had to think about seeing Jana and Christina's apartment with Theo's drawings on the wall. Because I think now, looking back, that was something where it maybe also all began, because the importance and this natural act of drawing, when that is nurtured like super early on from when you are a kid, and you know it's allowed everywhere, it's this fundamental artistic expression. I think this might really be something where all of this comes from, this feeling of a medium and a way to express yourself wherever you are and in whatever you do. X for extra. Sometimes I think it just needs a little extra to make people happy, especially kids. And I think with a magazine and with these cover designs, as you probably have noticed, that is something that is really important to me. Like, I do enjoy creating these and coming up with these concepts, but that is usually what also works for the audience at the same time. Why? For yes, because we heard the no's, and now we want to hear the yeses, and we need a little bit of sound up again.
Yes to drawing.
To a high-print run.
Yes to low pay.
To that weird feeling.
Yes to insecurity.
To fuck that comfort zone.
Yes to joy.
To new challenges.
To happy readers.
Yes to helping friends.
Yes, yes, yes to effort.
To nice paper.
To soup for lunch.
Yes to freedom.
To starting over.
To organized artists.
Yes to curiosity.
To continuity.
And to killing your darlings.
To winning awards.
To FM screens.
Yes to uncoated paper.
To fear for the right reasons.
Yes to pins.
To interviews.
To fun.
To making sense.
Yes to failure.
To meeting the deadline.
Yes to ownership.
And yes to wasting your time.
So where we are at Z, and now we are at 0 time left. Thank you.
I mean, I loved it, and I really enjoyed it. It feels like, you know, it gives us so much. It's beautifully packed, and I think it's good to, it's a beautiful lesson, is what it is. It's not, you know, it's a lesson you shared with us. So, thank you so much, Ariane, for the presentation. I would just like to.
How do you want to do it?
Well, basically, you know, if there's questions immediately, I think that's the best way.
I have two questions. First is the ordinary question.
Should be louder.
Should we use the microphone also? Can we take it off? It's fixed.
With the mic I can come here.
Yeah.
Ne možeš do tamo vrata, da se zapletke u karu. Neka dojde tu ga čovjek. Ajde, maš, ja ne mogu.
I have two questions. First is the ordinary one, or perhaps the female one, because usually women are the ones that have all the worries in the family. How does your on CNN they would have asked you how does your product go in the shop, or you simply never go to the shop? In other ways, do you ever think of in other words, do you ever think about the audience, and will they understand and or feel the way you do while you are preparing the magazine, or you're just a conceptualist, you're open for any kind of interpretations? And the second question is, you said you were in jail, but just to have as a metaphor, but were you ever like subject of any kind of repression? Because I know some other Swiss guys, and they were almost arrested because they were publishing. They were told they were publishing something that is by the law called a risky behavior. Thank you.
Okay, let me start from the back. No, I think we had never any issues with oppression. I mean, it is also like, I mean, we are doing this magazine out from Germany, and we are not a political magazine, so it's an art magazine. Usually in art there is a lot of freedom in artistic expression. Drawing is another layer, I think, of abstraction also, on top of that. So we haven't had that. I mean, I don't know if you can think of anything.
We have some problems sending like some of the issues, for example, the sex issue, and also the recent system issue, to sending it in China. That's the only thing.
That's
because the international magazine in China are quite strict with certain things. So there have been some problems, but otherwise, no. What was the next question?
I think there were 3 questions.
There were 2. The first was how you consider the audience and
do you consider it at all? Do you care how much money you make or you don't? Because you're with a family and you're also a mother.
The thing is that financially we don't rely on the magazine at all. And that is a freedom for us, so that we don't have to make our money through the magazine. And that is because I work as a designer actually most of the time, so my actually bigger part of my practice is design, graphic design for all kinds of clients, and for Björn it's art and exhibitions and brands and all this other field. So the magazine is really this kind of extra baby that we work on without wanting to. We want to make money with it. It's not to misunderstand. So we are happy if we can create some income from it, because that also means we can pay other people to work with us. That might be editors or translators and all these contributors. But no, we are not in the magazine for the money, and luckily we don't have to be. And yeah, in the audience, well, the audience, no. I think we don't really think about the audience. It's because it grew so slowly, the magazine. It started with Björn, starting out to show drawings that he is interested in of his group of friends in the beginning, and then inviting more and more artists that were drawing. And I think it built up slowly, and the audience, I think it grew up with the magazine. And I think it's more like a magnet. It attracts people, certain people that are into certain drawing or like expressions in drawing that come and like the magazine. But we don't really think about it in the way of, oh, we should rather not do this, otherwise we lose an audience.
Yeah.
What's your
we have, we usually try to combine a few established artists with emerging artists in each issue, and that's a little bit strategic in that sense that we also, of course, with the names, if we have Raymond Pericon or Louise Bourgeois, we know people will pick it up. Like, that name I know. If it would be only unknown names, some people might not pick it up. So it's a kind of like, it's a bit of a trick to make people pick it up. And then we show other people that they might not know about, and interviews with them. So it's kind of, so we still know something new about drawing. So maybe that's a little bit a trick.
No, that's absolutely right. And
there's also good for the emerging artists to be that in the magazine together with that established artists. So it's a benefit for everyone.
Yeah. And it's something that has become very much easier over time as well, of course. Some artists just want to be in a magazine where others, certain artists have.
I'm not surprised they didn't distribute the program because, for example, in China they didn't allow to distribute even the history of art of Gina Tosi, which is a classical one for the students of art history.
Thank you so much for your questions and for the answer. Would you like to?
I had more of a technical question. My question was like, in how many copies you're doing this magazine, and who is doing these really crafty covers, like.
They're produced.
Yeah.
Well, we started out with like 1,000 copies. We are right now at 3,000 copies. We think we can probably grow in the next years as well. So it's probably becoming more. But we are very concerned, of course, about distribution and that we don't have all of it yet. But we see a little bit right now that we can grow in that sense. And in terms of production, we produce mostly in the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia right now.
But also in Germany.
We have also produced in Germany, yeah. That's true, if the chain issue was produced in
chain and like the last thing.
This again in Latvia. So we look for printers that can.
But are these like
reasonable prices?
Houses, or do you?
Yeah. It would be in that case of our recent or of our current issue. It's the printer that did the whole thing. The chains, that was a mix between a printing house and then we shipped it to the prison and then shipped it back and
And there are some issues over there which are from our library that everybody is welcome to check out.
Sorry.
Good sound.
For video, you have ownership, which I thought was an interesting choice of word. And then if you take into consideration how many artists show work during the years, and you with the contribution of the other things of the cover, which is also not always made by one person. I mean, there are statements there with the chains that gets created, etc. If you include the lines, that's something which you cannot control, and so on. And then also, this is like guessing, so that which you get the drawings. So can you elaborate a bit more on that ownership sort of concept?
I mean, when I speak of ownership, I obviously talk about the magazine as a whole and all the decisions that we do around the magazine, and that there is no one who tells us what is maybe better to do and how much or how little we should sell or what we. So that's what I understand under ownership. And of course, I mean, every of the artists, every contributor always. It's their copyright. They are the owners of their work, obviously. And otherwise, it's like to include chance, like in the moment when we work with animals. I mean, that's just a design concept, basically. That's a concept of including something that we can't control. And yeah, maybe if you want to call it like that, it would be giving up ownership because they are doing something. But it is, in the same time, it is a controlled concept just of including the chance and the outcome. Yeah. And to let go also, but to set the boundaries of the framework.
Yes.
How do you do the selection?
The
first days, I assume, was like asking artists, and I assume now that you receive a lot of.
We, for the last 2 issues, we did an open call. So we actually had, like everyone could send in submissions. And for the sex issue, we chose not to have it because we didn't really dare to see what we got. But for the words issue and the system issue, we had, and I think we took maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of the artists from this open call. The rest we invited directly. So we do a lot of research for each issue. The system issue, we had a lot of discussions. What is a system? What can it be? An artistic system? We try to define it somehow, to find the definition, what a system can be. And in that sense, the open call was really helpful because then we saw the whole range, what people actually sent in of very different systems. So I think that was for us extremely helpful. We got maybe 500 submissions, I think, And from those 500, we picked out 10 artists. So that's usually what we, yeah, it's a big, it takes a couple of weeks only to go through all the works and do the decisions. But it's really interesting to see.
So you received a digital?
We have a digital open call. People send in a PDF or a website, and we look through everything. Yes. So that's something we will continue with, and also working with themes that we actually noticed. We were a bit afraid that it would narrow down too much, but it actually opens up even more. It's, we get like an audience that are interested in drawing in general, but also in a certain theme, system, or sex or text, which a lot of people are interested in. So it was it was interesting for us to see that it's actually opens up more.
I mean, for many years we were concerned like to have an international mix of artists, to have a good number of female artists, and men, and younger, and older, and established, and not so established. I think, and then came the point where we thought, okay, like now we have done that so many times, and we see these patterns, and now we start to work with topics. And yeah, we were afraid that, what if we just find 10 artists working with that and that theme? And it was the opposite that happened. It's also something that feels very obvious to many other publications and magazines. There are so many magazines that have like themes around, but for us, being both also coming with this very visual background, to be honest, an artist, me as a designer, it was always something where we were a little bit, maybe even afraid to really dive into something that, you know, really has a name and a topic and a subject. But I think it proved it's the right way to do, and it also, that is something that I experience now. It's easier for people to talk about the magazine once there are topics. All of a sudden, that's the system issue, and that was the text issue, and that one. So it became more, I don't know, people can grab it more, like, yeah.
But it's also, you also talked that the selection process of the editorial, it's very subjective.
Yeah.
And comes from also creative place.
Yes.
Because you take ownership of that, you make it because you want this, you love this, and you like the research, you like discovering. So, but it's really wonderful, and that you have opened the submission process.
Yes.
I can also say that you guys are always open with everyone to suggest artists.
Oh, yes.
Always,
That's also like one of the ways. Is there any other questions?